greet our wonderful panelists who are here today to share with you their experiences through the internship process. I'm Jennifer Jones. I manage the Economics Career Office, and it's great to see you all here. Thank you so much for being here, Caroline, Advoca, Carolyn, and Evan. Wonderful to have you back. And we have Flora Kim on the line, who works for the ECO, and she is managing our Zoom technology for us. So thank you, Flora, for that. As the manager of the Economics Career Office, I have the great privilege of running many of our programs this year. We have a staff of 4. Flora is one of them. You probably are getting emails from our staff, so thank you for opening those when they come. Usually they are about our events with alumni and with our student coaches. Please now, again, keep your video on, your mics off, and these programs are intended really for those of you who just joined us to help build not only your exposure to possible careers, to processes in recruiting, but to also give you experience speaking with students and alumni who have been in your shoes not so long ago. Okay, so what you can do here as far as technical goes, you can keep your speakers at our guest speakers at the top of your screen. You can drag people to different locations on your screen, and you can spotlight them if you would like. You can, these sessions are recorded, and later in the program, everyone will have an opportunity to go into breakout rooms. Students, attendees, I would like you please in the chat to send to us your year and your major. If you're undeclared, please send that information. That way I'm going to know that you are listening. So please do that right now in the chat. Please send to us your year and your major. And that way our panelists also have a sense of who's on the line. Okay, we're going to wait a minute and wait for that information to pop up. All right, great, great. Seeing some familiar names. It's so wonderful. Thank you for coming back. All right, so we've got some undeclared students, second year double major econ stats, music and econ. I don't see that one that often. I want to talk to you. All right, math and econ. Let's see, third year econ, maybe global studies added to that. Econ statistics, econ CS, global sustainability, data science, econ third year. Okay, anyone else who hasn't entered that information, please go ahead and do so. Caroline, Carolyn, Advoca, and Evan, keep these majors in mind in the years of our students as you answer the questions, because from your perspective, I'm sure you'll be able to tie some of that in. So thank you. So without any further delay, I'm going to allow our wonderful guests to share their backgrounds with all of you. What I'll ask you to do, since we have several of you on the line with us, could you please unmute yourselves when you're ready to speak? And that will be an indication to the rest of us that you have something that you want to say. Everyone doesn't have to answer every question after the first 3, where I'm going to give everyone a chance to share their personal backgrounds. Okay, so let's start with, I'm going to call on Carolyn to start us off. Carolyn, could you introduce yourself to us, share with us your name, of course, your year, what you're studying, and kind of your UVA resume, and then where you interned last year.
Yes, of course. Hey guys, it's great seeing you. Okay, so I'm Carolyn. I am a 4th year in the college studying economics and statistics. Okay, I'm forgetting. So I interned at UBS Asset Management last summer, and I'll be working there after graduation. At UVA, I'm part of Smart Women Securities, which is a female-run investment fund. I also am an English as a second language tutor with Madison House. And I was part of WLDP as well, Women's Leadership Development Program here at UVA. I might have forgotten one more thing to introduce.
Nope.
Sorry, is there anything else? Is that all?
Nope, that's it. That's what we got. We're going to circle back around to ask what your plans are for next year or what you're working on. Okay, great.
Okay, great.
Who wants to jump in next?
I can.
Great.
I'm Caroline. Confusing names there, but mine has the E on the end. I am also a 4th year, and I am a double major in econ and public policy in the Batten School, and I'm also a Spanish minor. I've done pretty much everything at UVA. I swear I've tried a little bit of everything, but right now I am a research assistant for a public policy professor in the Apple Lab, and I'm a program director also for ESL tutoring through Madison House and for a community garden. Last summer, I for search in DC, which does econ and litigation consulting.
Great, thank you. Okay, who wants to jump in next?
I can go. Hello, everyone. My name is Evan Stavig. I am a fourth year econ and Spanish double major with a Latin American studies minor. Here at UVA right now, kind of like Caroline, I've been involved in a lot of things over the years, but I am currently serving as president of VCC Virginia Case Club, which is a COM-affiliated organization that focuses on case competitions and case interview prep as well. So that I'll talk a little bit about that later. That's the typical consulting interview is a case interview, which is a little different than what you might be familiar with typical behavioral interviews. And well, I interviewed at Deloitte Consulting this past summer. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Great, thank you.
All right, my name is Advika. I'm a third year econ major, that minor. Also take lots of classes in the psych department. Not sure what's going to come of that though. In terms of things I do at UVA, I am currently an intern with Visas, which is an ESL program that serves the international community at UVA Charlottesville. I used to participate in a lot of international relations organization events. So if anybody's interested in collegiate model UN, I can talk a little bit about that too. And last summer, I interned with the Democracy Initiative at UVA.
Thank you. Advika, I think your volume is going in and out a little bit, and I'm not sure if you don't seem to be moving around a lot, so I don't think it's that. But we'll circle back to that in your next response. We'll see if we can fix it. Okay. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So I want to circle back around again and have everybody tell us what the organization they interned with, what that organization does. We heard a little bit about what Cornerstone does, and maybe to explain that a little more. So 2 questions here. What does your organization where you worked last summer do? And what are you thinking about for next year? A couple of you maybe kind of went into that a little bit. So go ahead and we'll start off again with Carolyn.
Okay, great. So UBS is an investment bank, and also they do wealth management, like commercial banking, all of those things. So they're a global bank. I am in the asset management side, so I deal with the buy side, and what that means is our clients are companies or high net worth individuals or pension funds, endowments, and we pool that money together and then find, based on the investor preferences, stocks, bonds, just asset classes to invest in for those customers or for those clients. So my internship was with client coverage, meaning I dealt with the team that works with clients, gets clients, makes like visuals for clients, but there's also the portfolio managers who actually do the asset picking and the stock picking and making those portfolios. There's product who they kind of are in between client and portfolio management. They do a little bit of both. There's marketing, legal, and I think I'm hitting on all 5. So there are a lot of different things to do in asset management. And next year I am doing a rotational program. So it's since I was in client coverage this past summer, next year for the next 18 months, I'll be doing a little bit of investment products, marketing, and client coverage as well. So it's kind of different than when you think of finance. A lot of people think of investment banking, that's the sell side. So they're helping companies IPO, they're helping companies merge. Asset management is buying those stocks, bonds, asset classes. So it's a little different on the buy side.
Okay, thank you so much for that explanation. That's really helpful. Just a couple of comments. Students on the line, in November, there will be a careers in finance program that's open to all students. It's sponsored by the Com School. Everyone who's interested in finance and what Carolyn just shared with us, please do attend that program if you are able. Also, you can head into Carolyn's breakout room in a bit in order to ask her follow-up questions, more specifically about those different roles that one could take at UBS, and any other questions that have come to mind. You'll also have a chance to do some of that in this panel, but I want you to mark your questions down now for the breakout rooms. Okay, great. Let's just go with the same rotation.
Cool. So I mentioned earlier that Cornerstone does economic and litigation consulting, but that's kind of a very nebulous term, and I definitely did not know what the industry did before I got there. Specifically, Cornerstone specializes in preparing experts to testify in court. So a lot of different consulting firms have cases that people work on. At Cornerstone, your cases are lawsuits. So I was working on 2 different lawsuits this summer, and we were paired with sort of a client and also an expert. And we would do usually econometric analysis and basically create a case for what the damages in a case should be, and then prepare an expert report that the expert would then deliver in court, and also prepare experts to testify in court in terms of like deposition practice. So it's an interesting mix of law and economics, and there are a lot of different cases depending on who is suing and who is being sued. But that's sort of the gist of what they do.
Okay, great. Thank you. So econ litigation consulting, just again to reiterate what Caroline said, intersection of business, law, and economics. And those firms, many of them have recruited for the season. There are some that are still recruiting for next year's internships, and you can find those on Handshake. Names of these companies are like Cornerstone Research, Analysis Group, FTI Consulting, NERA. All right, and you can ask more specific questions of Caroline in the breakout rooms. Okay, great. Next, Evan.
Cool. So I'll start with like what Deloitte is. I mean, it's one of the big 4 firms, which usually referred to tax services. So Deloitte does a few different service lines. They have a few different service lines. It's like tax, financial advisory, audit and assurance, and consulting and risk, I think too. So I did consulting. Which again, like if you're interested in any of the other ones, I think most of them recruit at UVA as well. Consulting is basically, like I was described to it initially as like a business therapist. So actually Deloitte has 2 sides of consulting. They have a commercial and a GPS. So GPS refers to clients that are in the government and public services space. So your client might be the federal government, it might be a local municipality that's rolling out, a new program based on, something that has been legislated that has changed. I was on the commercial side, so I worked directly with a business over the summer. My business was a retail and consumer products manufacturer that was looking to simplify customer terms, essentially. So they were, their big customers were like Target, Bed Bath & Beyond, Kroger. So they were going to their customers with essentially renegotiating terms. And so that looked like transportation terms, which had changed greatly during COVID, prices and stuff. So they were renegotiating the allowance that they were giving them for handling transportation, as well as payment terms. So that looks like days to pay, stuff like that, as aging cash costs had changed during COVID. So it was a pretty interesting summer. And that's kind of what management consulting looks like. I mean, there's a ton of different projects that you could potentially work on, but essentially, that client came to Deloitte and said, this is a problem that we have, a transformation we'd like to undergo, and we'd like to have you guys lead it. So.
Great, thank you. Okay, so more questions for Deloitte. We can ask them the panel as we have time. If not, jot down your questions right now so that you can ask them of Evan when you go into the breakout room. Deloitte is recruiting now for that GPS role. In fact, Deloitte has changed its recruiting process. Evan, you may be aware of this. They're just generally recruiting all year for roles that come up, rather than having just being part of a recruiting season, which tends to be late for consulting, late summer into the early fall. Okay, great. Let's go with Advika.
I worked with the Democracy Initiative first, can you hear me much better now?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
All right. So I worked with the Democracy Initiative last summer, which is a unit that's housed within the college at UVA. And they essentially establish research labs and other projects for a short-term period to study democracy in the US and beyond. And they come at it from lots of different perspectives. They recruit professors who have their own research interests and pursue things accordingly. I worked with a History and Principles of Democracy lab, which studies US democracy. And the project that I worked on was essentially a civic health report that they were publishing with partners, have published at this point, with partners that sort of gauges civic health in the country. And I contributed to it. I wrote profiles on civic health bright spots, which is what they called things or people that give us cause to be optimistic about the future of democracy. And I also sort of read the report and shared some thoughts I had with my supervisor. All of the labs are still continuing, and they're always recruiting for different kinds of positions, from research assistants to just more programmatic things. So I do recommend looking them up if this is the kind of thing you're interested in. I will also briefly say that I got this internship through something called the 22nd Century Scholars Program, which is administered by the Center for Politics, the Miller Center, Democracy Initiative, a couple others at UVA. And it's essentially a conglomeration of 5 or 6 different public policy focused units at the university. It started due to the pandemic when students lost a lot of public sector internships, and they've continued this year. I think they anticipate continuing even further given funding constraints. So definitely look that up when the time comes too.
Okay, thank you for that wonderful advice too about applying for 22nd Century Scholars. All of our panelists, could you send us the links for your organizations afterwards? You can actually send them in the chat. Flora will collect them, and then she'll send everything to our students who are attending afterwards. So you can send it in the chat, or you can send it to Flora later. I don't want to distract you too much, but you're welcome to send it now if you'd like. For those of you who had summer, actually, I'd like to know, what is everyone doing next year if you haven't told us already? What are you thinking about? What are you planning to do? What's already secured for you? And anyone can pop in.
I think I said this, but I'll be working at UBS Asset Management. But the cool thing about their offer program is it is that rotational. So 18 months of just seeing everything asset management, because there are so many different parts of it and so many different groups. And then after 18 months, you kind of get placed into one of those teams.
I am not currently decided about what I'm doing next year, but I do have an offer to come back to Cornerstone, which I will need to decide on by October 30th. And I interviewed a little bit for some government consulting firms as well. So I'm waiting to hear from those.
Caroline, how did you negotiate that with Cornerstone? I mean, when they made you the offer, did they say you don't have to tell us until October 30th, or what happened?
Yeah, I had talked with my mentor about that because I was worried initially, but when I worked for them last year and got my internship offer, I actually needed an extension then to consider other offers, and they were very flexible and worked with me, just gave me that. This time they did actually say October 30th, right from the get-go. So I was lucky that way.
Okay, yeah, so everyone on the line, please keep this in mind when you are recruiting. And for those of you who are looking for internships and even full-time jobs next year, UVA's guideline is we ask our employers to give students until October 30th in the fall to share their offer decision with employers who have offered them a position. It's a guideline, it's not a rule, but it is a guideline, and we can share that information with you if the time comes you need some printed information to share to with your employers. Okay, great. Who else? I
will be returning to Deloitte Consulting next summer or fall. I haven't set it yet on timing, but I'll be back there in their Chicago office next year.
And so that's commercial. You're staying with commercial.
Commercial, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm still figuring out plans for next summer. I've been applying to and interviewing with research-related roles, mostly think tanks, but also academic institutions. To be fair, a lot of that process will happen later this fall and early next spring. So lots of prep work right now.
Lots of writing. Okay. For those of you who might be interested in internships that are unpaid, UVA does have several opportunities for students to apply for scholarships and stipends. All right, and Flora and I will send that out after to you as well, so you have that information. Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit. If anyone has any questions that you want to send in the chat, you can go ahead and do that now. I'm going to ask a couple of follow-up questions to our team here. How did you get your job? And what was the interview process like? Or how did you get your internship? And anyone can jump in first. And I'm asking that really broadly, so you can take that however you want.
I could start. So like I had consulting kind of on my radar from, I believe it was an econ event that I went to earlier as a first or second year. I can't quite remember. But I researched, I learned about the firms and kind of what the timeline was, and also like what the process was for interviewing. So like I mentioned in my introduction, there's like a good amount of case interview prep that people do typically if they're planning on going through consulting recruiting. I know other industries too also have some sort of case interview that they also have. So they're kind of industry specific. So it's better to know what you're interviewing for prior to actually interviewing, obviously. So I researched there, and then kind of just shotgun my resume to the firms I was interested in when it came time my third year, so the fall semester my third year and end of the summer after my second year. But that wasn't it. There is a good amount of networking opportunities. You can reach out to alumni. I know there are tons of former econ majors that work at a variety of different consulting firms. So messaging them on LinkedIn, kind of getting on their radar for the recruitment team, I think is a really great way to stand out as a candidate and definitely help me secure my internship my third year.
I can go next. I also looked at management consulting and some other sort of consulting-esque roles. And so the summer after second year, I attended, I think it was career office sponsored, but basically Professor Brendan Bowler had a management consulting intro series that met once a week all summer. And I did that to help me sort of learn the casing basics because I wasn't used to them. And then I sort of stumbled across Cornerstone, I think actually in somebody's social media, and thought that sounded like an interesting intersection of my interests. And so I applied on Handshake. I had a first round interview, which was 2 half-an-hour long cases, and then a second round interview maybe a week or so later. And that one was actually 5 different cases, and also like a conversation with a partner that was more behavioral. But they also left time at the end for you to ask questions. And I would say that one of the most important things that led to me getting that job was realizing that there are some big difference in econ consulting and management consulting cases, and they want to know that you know that. So I got asked specifically, like, why econ over management consulting? And I happened to read an article like that morning about the different types of econ cases, which are not as much like profit loss and more about like maybe what a regression model would look like, or lost profits from patent infringement, things like that. That was really important to me being able to succeed in that interview process.
Okay, I can go next. My recruiting process was less linear and a little bit all over the place because I thought I wanted to do investment banking at first. So end of summer going into third year, I was interviewing and recruiting for investment banking. So going to all of like info sessions or things on the career center, anything to try to network with those people. But I also don't like accounting. I like econ and stat more. So when I decided that I wanted to do asset management, I applied through roles on Handshake. I think Handshake is the best place to find the internship opportunities. But then in terms of networking, I use LinkedIn a lot, and I would kind of just type like UBS, UVA, or UBS, anything that connected to me. So I'm in Smart Women Securities, UBS Smart Women Securities, seeing if anyone was also in that club at their university. So I connected with someone, reached out to her, applied to the UBS internship, and that's kind of how I networked and got introduced to UBS. And I think for me, networking was quality over quantity, which isn't always the case. Sometimes it's knowing a bunch of names at a firm, but I think having someone to really root for you and say, we want you at the company is important. So really finding someone, whether it's a UVA person or someone you find on LinkedIn, is helpful. And that was like the most helpful for me. And to Caroline's point, sort of about economic consulting versus management consulting, asset management, there are a lot of different looks to an asset manager. So like UBS is an asset management section of a bank, but hedge funds are also asset managers. Private equity is also asset managers. So that's something to prepare for the interview. Like, why do you want to be at UBS rather than BlackRock or just a single asset manager? And that's kind of how the interview process is different than investment banking. I hope I'm not cutting out. Everyone seems to be frozen for me.
You're not cutting out for me.
Okay, now everyone's back. Was I good? Okay.
Yeah, I think we heard everything you had to share there. Thank you, Caroline.
Yeah, so my process was also a little bit all over the place. Fall of second year, so a year ago, I was still figuring out a lot of what I wanted to do, what I was interested in. So I really hadn't made a decision. I was exploring things. I was looking up stuff on Handshake and talking to people, but not really doing much applying. And I lucked out because a lot of public policy hiring does happen in the spring. So like that prep time worked out for me, unless you want to do intelligence, in which case fall is the time. But at that point, I knew that I wanted to go into those kinds of roles. So I spent lots of time on Handshake, just scrolling through opportunities and applying to lots of different stuff. The 22nd Century Scholars Program actually arrived in my inbox because I was on relevant listservs like the Center for Politics and the Miller Center. And that application process was straightforward, but it was also quite short. They had a very short turnaround time for when you needed to submit an application. There were a couple of essays involved and a somewhat lengthy application to fill out. There weren't any interviews. It was just that written application. And once it had gone through, they were quite quick about coming back to us. I think it took about a week or two. But this was late spring, almost towards the end of the semester.
Okay, thank you. You all have offered some really great advice. Just a couple of notes here that I've taken. First of all, you've given great comfort, I think, to our student attendees about how there may not be a real organized process sometimes here, right? Sometimes this is a matter of information that you receive and then make decisions about, and sometimes there's some serendipity. But a couple of things that you all have done is you've known about the recruiting cycle for your area of interest. And if you didn't know it initially, you learned what it was. So please, students, make sure that you're familiar with the recruiting cycle for industries or public service, public organizations that interest you. So public sector and private sector, and you can always make an appointment with me or with career advisors at the UVA Career Center to find out more about that. Getting on relevant listservs, really important, right? You can get relevant newsletters from the UVA Career Center through your profiles on Handshake, so make sure those are up to date. And then what else? Oh, LinkedIn. A couple of people have talked about LinkedIn. You want to have a LinkedIn profile. If you don't have one, I'm glad to help you set one up. And on our ECO website, we do have a link about how to create your LinkedIn profile. Okay, great. All right, thanks. So I'm going to ask one other question, and then we're going to go into our breakout rooms. And this is, I know you're all actually quite humble, so I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of bragging, but I'm asking you to do this, okay? I want to know what happened between starting at UVA and applying for these internships that you landed that made you attractive to employers, right? So there's something that there's things that you did, classes you took, experiences that you were involved in that made you attractive to the employers. And now you probably know more of what they were than you did before. Could you share that with our students so that they can help prepare themselves to be attractive candidates for employers? Anyone can start.
I can start. I definitely don't know if there was like one thing, but I think one of the hallmarks of sort of the consulting industry is that you work in a lot of different areas with a lot of different skills. And so I really think they're looking for a diversity of experiences and skill sets. And so one of the things that I often brought up was, like I'm both a public policy major and an econ major. So I've learned how to use analytics, but I also know how to write and I know how to persuade and to do good research. And I think that was a helpful combination for me because I think people do oversimplify the industry as being maybe more quantitative or quantitative than it is. And so I think showing that you have other skills that can bolster sort of your analytical skills helped a lot. But also I was asked frequently sort of what my best analytical project was. And having to define that in advance, I think helps me a lot because I couldn't have told you that right off the bat previously. And some of my experiences doing research, either for class or in my case with a lab, were a really good example of an analytical project that I had helped shape and create.
Okay, great. Thank you. So knowing really what's important in the industry and the job function that you want to enter is important, right? And you just shared to us what's important in econ and litigation consulting. And then demonstrating that probably through your written materials, your resume, and a cover letter, you can also demonstrate those skills. And that econ policy background really helped you. Thank you, Caroline. Who else to help our students prepare?
One thing, it's kind of like what Caroline mentioned, but like knowing what the industry is and like what a project may look like. I mean, in the case of consulting, but I'm sure this is pretty applicable to whatever industry you are all interested in. You don't necessarily have to have prior internship experience that's super relevant. People know is, coming into the summer of after your third year that that's the time that people get often their first professional experience. If you have experience before that, that's fantastic, but it's far from expected or required. But I think being able to frame up your experiences in a way in both an interview and a cover letter, and a resume for that matter, that are relevant to the industry is a really, really helpful skill to have. So whether whether it was a project at UVA, whether it was a job, waitressing or being a waiter or food busing or lifeguarding or anything, talking about it in a way that like is similar to the way that they would approach something in my experience in consulting or again in whatever industry you're thinking about applying to, really I think is a way to set yourself apart. I know in mine I talked about like I was a lifeguard in high school, and so I talked about like in my cover letter compliance or something, I don't remember, but quantifying a way in which we implemented a change and I helped lead it. I think that was a way which set me apart.
Absolutely brilliant. Telling your story in relation to the industry and job function that you want to enter, right? Who would have thought lifeguarding and then Deloitte commercial consulting, right? But it does make sense. And you may need somebody to help you to find those threads that tie them together. Okay, great. Thank you. Who's up next?
I can go next because mine is similar to that. Think about your past experiences in terms of the skills you gain. So I was a waitress for the summers before UBS. I hadn't done anything in finance or like typically related to asset management, but finance is so much teamwork and getting through like long days and working on projects. And that's kind of what waitressing was a lot of times, staying up late, staying at the restaurant late. So just think about your past experience and how those skills can help the internship you're applying to. And kind of a second thing that I think landed me this role, and I actually spoke to someone I interviewed afterwards about it, was just genuine interest. I really knew a lot about UBS versus other competing firms. It wasn't just asset management as a whole, like really know why you want that internship you're applying to. And then the interview will be more of a conversation, and they'll ask you a question, but you'll say something that they can comment on, and then you're kind of talking rather than them reading questions to you. So if you can somehow make interviews into conversations, they'll remember you, they'll feel comfortable, they'll want you on their team. That's a lot of interviewing, is just seeing if you'd be a good fit on their team. So really figuring out how to have your personality show, because a lot of times when you have the interview, they know you're smart, you go to UVA, you're definitely qualified for roles. It's just interviews are like proving that you can add to the team and join the team. So just show your genuine interest.
And that's something to really keep in mind, because if you don't have a genuine interest in something, maybe it isn't the place for you to go, right? And you might not know until you go to employer info sessions, right? You might not know something, a career field even exists, like Caroline was talking about, econ and litigation consulting, right? You learn that along the way. So of course, we can't say that you maybe had a passion since you were 10 years old for econ and litigation consulting, but that's something that can grow. Okay, great, thank you. And Advocate.
Mine is also similar, but I will try to narrow it down to something tangential but separate. Writing. I think writing helped me a lot, not just in terms of landing this role, but also eventually succeeding at it. It's a skill that I continue to develop, and that still gives me a lot of grief if I'm completely honest about it. But just going through that hard work of confronting, why is writing difficult for me sometimes? Why is it something that I tend to delay? And doing that work before getting into a professional setting, and then doing that work and then eventually being able to utilize that skill in lots of different contexts, because academic writing is very different from professional writing, is very different from public facing writing. And all of those are things that I've been able to dabble in over time. And so just to be able to develop a skill to the degree that you can maneuver it to suit the different kinds of situations that you're in is really helpful.
Thank you. Okay, great. We're really learning if something is a good fit for you and and the skill that's needed. A lot of our econ majors don't have a chance to do as much writing unless they take a couple of the higher level electives. So if you can get those through another major, right, or through doing a thesis paper, fourth year, that's something that really can supplement the traditional econ degree here at UVA. In other schools, there tends to be more writing, but we have so many majors. So thinking about one more thing I want to say, this group all must have had pretty strong resumes to get the opportunities that they did, resumes with relevant information on that. How do you find out if you have the relevant skills, right? If you have gaps. So this is where you want to come to a program like this, or look at career overviews on the ECO website, industry overviews. You can use Vault to help you find that information. We want to make sure that you know what certain careers require so that you can prepare ahead of time. I will just give you a quick anecdotal example. I put out a job posting to all econ majors today, asking students for fourth years who are interested in asset management, if they are interested in a job in Florida with a family office, family financial office. And I got back a couple of resumes from fourth years who don't have any finance experience other than the economics classes, right? So those students are not going to be strong competitors for those roles. They might be interested, but they don't have the skills yet that would make them competitive. All right, so keeping that in mind. All right, panelists, thank you so much.